and welcome back to Rue's Life. So yesterday I made a start on getting some more pathways in between my beds, and particularly around the edge of this newly created bed. The weather yesterday was actually quite poor. It was dark and very overcast and drizzly, so not ideal conditions for filming, but I really wanted to make a start. And yet again, proof that when you're not feeling too great, I've been a bit under the weather and mentally not feeling too good, but actually getting out and getting something done was a real sense of achievement. So yesterday my task to myself was just to get this one stretch of bed done, which I've done. So I laid down the weed suppressant membrane, and then it took about 5 wheelbarrows of the wood chip, which I then spread out. So we've now got a path between the bed behind me and this new bed. What I want to do is do the bottom end, which I need to join on from a pathway, and I've already moved a little bit of the edging, and up that side I want to do a stretch across where you are, and then again up the edge here, so the whole of this bed has a path around it. And that's what I'd like to achieve today. If I get more than that done, fantastic, and if I don't get as much as that done, it's not the end of the world. But it's already starting to look really, really good. So that is what I'm planning to do today. So I'm just scraping back some of the wood chip that is already on this path to just expose some of the membrane that's already down, so I can do a little overlap. And this membrane was bought for me for part of my birthday present, and it's 1 metre by 50 metre. You can get it wider, but what's useful about this is I've got some narrow strips, so I just needed one length up that path, and I can just double it over for my wider pathways. So I've just overlapped that by 2 or 3 inches so that when I put the wood chip down, it's got a nice overlap on it. Now, in an ideal world, I would weed all the way along here and really get all of this grass up. But what I'm actually going to do is just tuck it down and then push the membrane a little underneath this log. And that's fine by me, and I will always have a little bit of grass coming up along the edges, but I just weed that. And as I say, in an ideal world, I would spend some time weeding it, but you know what? That's the sort of thing that would stop me from doing this job today, the thought of having to do all the weeding all the way around the edges. So I'm just going to crack on. It's going to do a good job, and I will deal with the aftermath. You know, when those little weeds come through, I'll just pull them up, and it's been pretty successful on all the other pathways, so I'm just going to carry on in the same way. And of course, because I've managed to get this wood chip for free, the advantage of that is I can put a really, really thick layer down, and that'll really help to stop those weeds from coming through. So I'm going to roll this out, and then I am just going to hooch it over a little bit, because the edges of my beds are far from square and they're a bit wibbly wobbly. If I just push it over a bit, I can tuck it right under. So I'm just rolling it out initially, and then I'll rejig. So you'll notice I haven't cut my length yet, and the reason for that is as soon as I got back down to this end, I'd actually already, when I was tucking it and moving along it, it had actually moved, and I'd lost that lip, so I've just pulled it back. Whereas if I'd cut it, I'd be cutting it at the wrong length. I've got a little overlap here between the two paths. There we go. So now I can cut it and do the second roll or run. Not bad. So I'll just get the scissors. Which I've left over here. So I'm just going to chop the end of this roll. And then let's start a second run, and I may even need a third bit here. So I'm just going to follow the fence line on this side, and there's going to be a little gap up the middle which I can then cover. So we've got a bit of a V shape going on, but that's okay. And that's ready to chop. So you can see I left this overnight, and that's how much rainfall we've had. It's really been bucketing it down overnight, but it's nice and dry now. So you can see I've been bringing load after load and just dumping it down, and then I'm spreading it out with my hands. I've got a few more loads to go, and that's this section of path finished. But I think I'm going to have a quick cup of coffee before I push on. So that's the last of this builder's bag, which is pretty much going to finish this section, and obviously I've done that section, and we also topped up all the other paths, but I'm going to need to go and fetch some more before I can do any more. So I'm going to finish spreading this out, and I think that's a job well done. And there we have it, and I'm really pleased with it. Now, it's far from perfect, and I'm sure there'll be those that might be watching that will say, you know, you should have mowed the grass first, you should have weeded the edges. Some people don't like the weed suppressant membrane. There are a whole host of things that we could say about this project. Now, I did make a video, and I will leave a link above, about can we have it all? Pretty, practical, productive. And I'm trying to keep a balance of all three. And, you know, I hold down a full-time job, we're running the farm, there's lots going on in our lives. So for me, the most important thing is to have a productive plot. But it's also nice to have it looking quite nice, and also to be practical. So these pathways are, yes, there's an aesthetic element to them. It really does make the plot look nicer. But if you could see what I'm slipping and sliding around in the mud up by the entrance to the plot and around the side of the polytunnel, that's the other reason. If I hadn't got these pathways in, if I'd done them as grass paths, it would just be really muddy. And of course then there's the maintenance as well of having to mow. So when you think about the green element of the weed suppressant membrane, I have a petrol lawnmower, and the amount of petrol I would use in a season to keep these pathways trimmed and mowed, to me kind of offsets the fact that I've bought this plasticky membrane. I'm going to put it down and I'm going to leave it down, and then I'm just going to keep topping up with these wood chips. So that's my justification anyway. It's in no means scientific. That's just how my mind works. And with regards again to getting a project done, again, in an ideal world, we've got some boards up here and they're literally just propped against the fence. You know, we'd have spent the time levelling it all off and digging it out and putting proper boards with stakes to hold them in place. And you know, I wish I had the time and also the finances to really fund a project like that. But the reality is, I haven't got the resources, I haven't got the funds, and I certainly haven't got the time. So for me, when I see an opportunity, I will grab it. And I'm really pleased with these pathways. And I'm just going to walk you around, because when you think the pathways that I've got around the rest of the plot were generated in exactly the same way as this, and they've lasted really well. So it works. So we'll start at this bottom end here. You can see I've just found some bricks. Because this project is by no means finished, I have just left the edges exposed. If I can find some more of the scaffold boards lying around the farm, then I will put more boards along here, and that'll just help to, number one, stop the bark from spilling out onto the verge, and number two, it helps to stop the grass from encroaching in. So that's going to do two things, but if we haven't got any, then I'm just going to push that bark up to the edge. But I've popped the bricks down for now just to anchor it down. And if we just walk around, you can see I'm really pleased with how this has come off. So in the last 2 days, I've done this stretch all the way to here, and this stretch of pathway here. So let's go and have a little look. So I'm going to tilt you down so you can really see what I've done. So that's the stretch, and now we're going into, you can see the line of old and new, and then I'll just tip you round and you can see this section, and we'll just gently walk around. These paths have been topped up, and what a difference it's made. And then the other thing I use with the scaffold boards in between my beds, and again they're not ideal pathways because I do have to balance on them, but I've got scaffold boards sectioning up my beds, and I can just balance along them. In an ideal world, again, I'd have done wider gaps in between and put the bark down, but you know, I tend to use what I've got at the time, and also it was a space factor, because if I come back a little, you can see that there's no way between, I mean, I could have made a narrower path here, but between the polytunnel and the beds, if I'd put bigger pathways in, there just wouldn't have been the space to put these 3 beds. And I'm really pleased. Let's pan back with how this has progressed over a 3 to 4 year period. So we've now got the fruit bed here, we've got the 3 veg beds, we've got the squash bed, and then behind that is the newest bed, which is going to be dedicated to flowers. And then obviously there's the polytunnel and my little rhubarb bed there. And now it's time to sit back with a cup of coffee and admire this morning's project. And I'm really pleased with the results. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all well. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.